When Steve Millington returns next week, we're going to have a conversation about Donald Trump on the air. Next week, of course, is the South Carolina primary, and Trump has a healthy, at least in polls, incredibly healthy lead in New Hampshire today. And he's got a very healthy lead in the polls in South Carolina. And if he were to win in South Carolina, he will essentially have the opportunity to then run the rest of the table on his way to the Republican nomination. And what will that mean for the Republican Party? Steve is going to talk about that with us when he comes back next Tuesday for his regular appearance right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Speaking of Donald Trump, a couple of things here today. Saw this at the Washington Examiner this morning. Trump's D.C. hotel will open 2 years early. Trump first came to public prominence. New York City, back in the early 80s, was trying to build a skating rink in Central Park. And, of course, government bureaucrats involved and City Parks Department, and they got way behind schedule, and there were cost overruns. And in desperation to try to quiet all of the tabloid newspapers, Donald Trump was brought in to get the project done, and he got it done in a couple of months and greatly reduced all of the cost overruns they were having. Well, here we go again. Trump's D.C. hotel opening 2 years early. The Trump Organization announced Monday that its first hotel in Washington would open to the public this September, more than 2 years before its original scheduled completion date of 2018. The $200 million renovation will yield 263 hotel rooms and suites, including the Trump Townhouse, a 6,300-square-foot suite that comes with a private street entrance. The Trump International Hotel may also be where the GOP frontrunner calls home if he receives the party's nomination and goes on to win the general election because, while it's standard for the president to live at the White House, it's not a requirement of the office. 8 minutes. He's already said, though, he would live there. 8 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, although I suppose when it comes to state dinners and entertaining dignitaries, he could split his time between the two locations. It's 29, and we're on our way into the high 30s today, and looking at some of the photographs this morning from New Hampshire where they're having that primary. There is snow on the ground, but it's not snowing heavily in most places in New Hampshire right now. And when we hear it's going to depress turnout, keep in mind it snows there in February. They've been there before. This is not something unusual. Donald Trump speaking with Chris Matthews. Chris Matthews, of course, the blowhard from MSDNC and former Democrat Party hack hired to do a news show there. Speaking with Trump on television. The candidate throws Matthews off his game when he's talking about how he neutralized Bill Clinton, and then listen to how fast Matthews changes the subject.
Out with that thing about sexist charges and all.
They have not said a bad thing about me.
I know, you pushed him off the trail.
Were you impressed? Were you impressed?
I'm impressed with stuff that works in this case. Anyway, let's go about the Clintons and the Bushes are nothing politically right. They're having such a hard time out in the stump. You don't like Jeb. You've been
I don't like him, and I'll tell you why.
Why don't you like a nice old guy?
I'll tell you why. He spent $20 million on ads against me, which he shouldn't have done. He should have focused on people that are ahead of him, but he spent $20 million. They're false ads, and he says false things about me. I mean, he says so much, talks about Second Amendment. Nobody's stronger in Second Amendment than me. He would make it believe like I'm not. He brings up taxes. I have the biggest tax decrease of anybody else, and he makes it sound like I'm going to increase
What about it?
that.
What about the stadium?
He's really lied. The stadium is another one. Eminent domain. Thank you very much. Eminent domain. He talks about me with eminent domain. It just came out this morning that his father and the group, the Bushes, not him because he's not smart enough to do it, but his group used eminent domain to get the stadium bought, the land around the stadium bought in Texas.
You remember Mr. Bush was running campaign commercials, and he wasn't alone. Rand Paul also attacked Trump on this, that Trump had tried to chase an old lady out of her old house in Atlantic City, New Jersey. He owned some casinos on the same street. She was living in the last house. It was a townhouse, an old decrepit place, but, that was her choice. And that he tried to use eminent domain to chase her out of the home so he could tear it down and build a parking lot for his casino. Well, he points out Matthews actually leads him there. Matthews leads him there that the Bush family itself has done similar things in order to get football stadiums built. It's awfully difficult for a candidate who lives in a glass house to throw stones. But here's a question for all of you this morning. And a friend of mine has noticed this and shared it with me over the weekend. My friend is a Trump supporter. My friend grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, His father and uncle were at times bodyguards for Frank Rizzo when Rizzo was the mayor of that city. A lot of people make comparisons between Trump and Rizzo as far as their bluntness when it comes to how they campaign. But my friend said to me the other day, he said, back when Trump first got his campaign off the ground, over at places like MSDNC, they were screaming that he was a racist. Remember that? But over the course of several months, the crowd over there at that network, that very liberal network, they have become very much backers of Donald Trump. Chris Matthews shied away when Trump said, look how I got Bill Clinton to back down. Wasn't that impressive? And Matthews changes the subject. But then Chris Matthews leads Trump into the conversation, allowing Trump to criticize Jeb Bush as if he's working for, it's as if he's working for the Trump campaign. And over at Morning Joe, which is the flagship show for that network, Joe Scarborough, the main host, and his sidekick, Mika Brzezinski. Scarborough was a congressman from Florida, term limited himself, promised to leave after 6 years, and he did, and he's been on television pretty much ever since. He has been mentioned as a vice presidential candidate for Trump. Mika Brzezinski is the daughter of the former national security advisor to President Carter. Zbigniew Brzezinski, so she's a Democrat. The two of them are backing Trump. Eugene Marvin, the Martian Robinson, who attacked Trump throughout the summer. He's a columnist from the Washington Post. He's now on board with Trump. Some of the other people who are regulars on that program appear. Mike Barnacle to be on board with Trump. So you've got to ask yourself, what's happened here? Are these people at this liberal network, though, leading us, trying to lead Republicans down this path with Trump because they believe that Trump can easily be beaten in a general election? Does it make you a little nervous that so many of these people at that liberal network are suddenly on the Trump bandwagon? 9:14, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 28. Trump may, by the time we get to Idaho 4 weeks from now, may pretty much have this thing sewn up. But I tend to believe, I just have a gut feeling, that as we move along through the next few weeks, some of this Trump boomlet is going to fade. I don't buy that term momentum. But I just think that people, at a certain point, there's going to be Trump fatigue. We have a caller with us, the number 736-0300. Caller, you're on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill. When you mentioned Zbigniew Brzezinski, he was the one that wrote a book, Between Two Ages, and he was one of the organizers of the Trilateral Commission to set up regional government around the world on the way to world government. And I think we're being snookered by Trump, and the more you look at what he doesn't say, he's never mentioned the word Constitution, I don't think, in any of his speeches. And you notice the networks totally avoid Ted Cruz. I mean, it's just so obvious when they're doing the reporting. But Trump, that the world government people, the elitists, want us to believe us little people, the little John Does of the world, they're smarter than we are. So we have got to sacrifice our sovereignty for the new world order. And in doing that is the transformation of America that Obama has nearly accomplished. I mean, you look at what's happened to this. We're becoming a banana republic with all these refugees, illegal aliens coming in here, our debt over 19 trillion. I mean, we're being sucked down into the third world status.
Well, let me throw this one at you. If Bloomberg gets in, and obviously Michael Bloomberg and Trump had to work, hand in glove on projects in New York City together. They're members of the Billionaires Club. They likely attended a lot of the same parties together, same events together. Bloomberg being the liberal, and he may have called himself a Republican for a while, but Bloomberg would essentially turn around and take votes away from the Democrats, handing the election to a Trump. Do you see perhaps a fix-in, a grand sort of conspiracy here?
Oh, absolutely. I really think that obviously they hate Ted Cruz. They don't like Marco Rubio, what's been brought out. And so you see the Cannons. They're the only two that have come out and said that Obama has fundamentally, on purpose, been transforming this country. And both foreign and domestic policies have been anti-constitutional, anti-free enterprise, anti-Christian, and anti-military. Everything that most Americans really want in a candidate. Trump has been trying to bring that out to some extent, but he really doesn't come up with any real solutions. And his past history really is scary. I think it should be to most people. But like I say, I think your analysis is really on target, that we really need to be aware of what Trump's ulterior motive is. And when you start seeing the Brzezinski and all these liberals lining up behind him, I mean, these people really want to destroy this country and create a new world under the United Nations. And so, we really need to wake up as to what past history. If we don't study history and know what the background of these people are, we're going to be sucked into a lot worse situation than we are now. And we need to be waking up to the fact that Obama has fundamentally almost succeeded in transforming this country. Thank you.
Hey, thank you much for chiming in this morning. 9:18, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. And speaking of Ted Cruz, he does believe that he's not going to win in New Hampshire, but believes he can beat expectations. But he is looking forward to perhaps regaining the lead elsewhere in the country in another region, as he was sharing with Sean Hannity last night on the Fox News channel.
I think they have assessed that in their view, New Hampshire is going to be moderate-a-palooza, that it is a battle to see who will be the prevailing moderate. From our end, we think we're going to do well in New Hampshire. We hope we will. We've worked very hard. I think we've got a lot of support. But the day after New Hampshire, we're in South Carolina. We've got an amazing team in South Carolina. I think we're poised to do very, very well there. We're poised to do very well in Nevada. And then 10 days after South Carolina,
big Super Tuesday SEC primary.
And that, you look at the states there, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. My campaign manager jokes if his 22-month-old daughter got out crayons and drew the perfect states for us on Super Tuesday, we couldn't draw a better map than that. And I think we're positioned to have an amazing day on Super Tuesday. And I think the reason why you saw the moderates all fighting with Marco Rubio is one of them is going to come out as the lead moderate, and each of them wants to be the lead moderate.
And there you go. Ted Cruz last night on Fox News Channel with Sean Hannity. More coming up in just a moment. More of your telephone calls as well. Short break. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 28. Going to be a great day when we look outside. The skies will clear, and just another brilliant day filled with sunshine and temperatures in the high 30s. We can only hope for warmer weather. Story today at National Review. Just want to share this with you quickly. It comes from Jim Garrity. And he says part of the problem is we would not have seen the rise of Donald Trump if the Republican elites had had a better grasp of what the party was all about, the rank and file, that is, 4 years ago. Because after they lost the election, they said, well, you know what it is? We don't have enough Latin outreach. We need to have more illegal immigration. And they went out and they even recruited Marco Rubio to be the point man on that because he has a Latin last name. Although a lot of people who call themselves Latinos will not consider people with Cuban ancestry to be of the same. Well, what that really is all about is the people with Cuban ancestry are Republicans for the most part, and the rest are not. So if you ever look at that, the people who came here from Cuba are generally very successful people in life, and so they end up as Republicans, which is what a lot of successful people do. So they recruited Rubio to go about all of this, but they were so wrong. They did not realize what a huge issue, going all the way back to 2007, when talk radio put a stop to amnesty at the time. They just did not learn their lesson. So they went out and they created a situation that led to the rise of Donald Trump. 9:25, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And Hillary Clinton is going to jail. We had some testimony that came out of the FBI in the last few days, and it was actually uncovered through the Freedom of Information Act, but the FBI confirming, yes, indeed. And there was a writer, I saw a link at Real Clear Politics this morning. The writer is pointing out that back in the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, people were screaming treason because someone in the White House outed Valerie Plame, who was a CIA operative. Well, what Hillary Clinton did was far worse. That means far more treasonous. The woman is going to prison. Got it? The woman, or otherwise there is no rule of law in this country any longer. We have a caller with us. You're up next on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Yes, the previous caller, Adrian, he was talking about, just where we are as a society in general. And last night on Jesse Waters' World, O'Reilly Factor, he was at, I'm pretty sure they were at University of Oregon. And they were talking about LGBT and other issues, and he was asking them certain questions. And then I had brought this up last week about what people that were supporting Sanders, they didn't understand what socialism was, and they couldn't even define it.
Right.
And this unbelievable, shocking lack of knowledge by these college students at the University of Oregon. And so then at 7 o'clock, I started watching a show on Newsmax called Dennis Michael Lynch, and he seems to be very good to me. Now, that's just my opinion. And he had an interview with kids from Texas Tech, and you would think that maybe in Texas, where they tend to be a little more based in Christian belief, and that they might have a little more be grounded. And they were asked questions about who won the Civil War, and other things, and they could not. It scares the hell out of me, is what it does. And so, but see, where does this really leave us, and how many of these lost souls are there? And our education system is so screwed up that is there any saving a couple generations? Okay, that being made in the with all the new, the Iowa caucuses, the New Hampshire primary, we've forgotten that Lavoy Finicum still seems to have murdered right there on the side of the road, and the rest of these guys are in solitary confinement, Ammon, Bundy, and others, and that story seems to have been lost in the shuffle. And I'll hang up. Thanks.
Thank you for the call. Yeah, that story, even Drudge, somebody pointed out the other day, even Drudge isn't following that one any longer. But if he'd been a black 300-pound teenager who just robbed a store of cigars in Ferguson, Missouri, and went out and tried to assault a police officer and got killed, it would be front-page news right now. But because he was not a person of color and he worked for a living, you're not going to hear much about it. 928, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Speaking of educating children and what they don't know, we had that conversation yesterday about a constitutional convention, an Article 5 convention to try to straighten the country out. And a caller referenced, seeing a video about that. I got a video actually yesterday in my email from the John Birch Society, which explained how this would work, but how it could also go off the rails if it actually happened. And the conclusion of that video is this: if we would educate our people, starting as children, about what the Constitution and liberties are really all about, you would elect people who would then follow that Constitution, instead of electing people who keep saying, I'll give you free stuff, like Bernie Sanders. And that would be the direction, the better solution. But dumbing down the populace seems to be part of the plan. We've got more on the way. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. It's 29 at 9:30, excuse me. I got my time zone a little bit wrong here.